McGraw-Hill Education webinar, Directing and Measuring Literacy Achievement with Reading Mastery. This is part 3 of our 3-part series this year with Dr. Tina Eartham. And I'm Lindsay Root with McGraw-Hill Education, and I will be the webinar moderator for today's session. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping items. This webinar is being presented in listen-only mode, which means you will be able to hear the presenter, but they won't be able to hear you. It doesn't mean you cannot participate. We, of course, want to hear any questions you have, so feel free to type those questions in the questions panel on your toolbar. Joining us today is Dr. Tina Eartham. Dr. Eartham is the Direct Instruction Facilitator for Greeley-Evans School District in Greeley, Colorado. She develops and provides ongoing direct instruction professional development to the teachers, her instructional coaches, and administrators for K-12 in a district that serves over 20,000 students. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Tina Eartham.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you all for being here today. I know it is a busy time of year for all of us, and I do appreciate you taking an hour or so to spend with me. My name is Tina Eartham, and I am the Direct Instruction Facilitator for Greeley-Evans School District 6 in Greeley, Colorado. This is the 3rd webinar in our 3-part series. I feel fortunate in being able to share our school district's journey in implementing RMSE as the core literacy program in kindergarten and 1st grade in 8 of our elementary schools this year, especially as we are heading into the final days of school and our end-of-year data has been collected. In our last webinar, we spent the majority of the time looking at how you could create a system to ensure growth using Reading Mastery Signature Edition, including logistics around appropriate placement, how we maximize the use of all allocated instructional time, and teaching every student and lesson to mastery. Today I will highlight the data we collect, analyze, and use to tell the story of an RMSE student or group to help ensure growth and accelerate learning when possible. Finally, I am excited to share some of the results of our end-of-year data with you. We have a lot to celebrate and are very clear on goals that we have for year 2. As a reminder, Greeley-Evans School District 6 is the 13th largest school district in the state of Colorado. 26% of our students are English as second language learners, and over 64% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. There are 15 elementary and K-8 buildings in our district, 8 of which used RMSE as core in kindergarten and 1st grade this year. 5 more are coming on board this fall. That means that all but 2 of our buildings will be our RMSE as core in kindergarten and 1st grade for the 2015-2016 school year. Our decision to use RMSE as core literacy as the core literacy program in kindergarten and 1st grade came as a result of our district experiencing a drop in benchmark data in 1st grade every year. This drop was significant at both the beginning and mid-year testing periods, and though incredible measures were taken in an attempt to identify and correct the problem, we struggled to rebound from this challenge to ensure high levels of reading proficiency moving forward. In our last webinar, we broke each of these root causes down, and I gave you specific examples and think-abouts regarding how to implement RMSE to ensure the growth and the acceleration of students in reading. Direct instruction and reading mastery will work when students are appropriately placed, all allocated time is being used, and the teacher is teaching every lesson and student to mastery. It is important to remember that these root causes as we start to discuss the data we collect to ensure growth, the growth that we can expect with RMSE. If we aren't seeing the growth, one of these root causes is coming up. The data we collect to tell the story of a student or group helps us set measurable short-term and long-term goals. This data includes the long-term calendar, aligning outside measures for progress monitoring with where the students are in RMSE, the pacing guide, the DI groups update, common mastery test grade sheets, Fluency checkout books, and daily lesson data collection sheets. This is a lot of data to teach, collect, and use in making decisions regarding student placement and mastery. My hope is that by the end of our time together today, you will understand the data we collect, be able to articulate the rationale for collecting each piece of data, and see how you and your team might be able to start introducing and using such data to ensure mastery of student learning in your implementation of reading mastery. Please note that there is a lot of professional development required to teach the teachers how to collect and use this data to drive their instruction. In our system, teachers are trained on how to use this data in one of two main ways. First, we offer a full-day training each summer called DI in Data. We spend an entire day teaching and practicing the use of each of these measures. Second, for new implementers, we introduce them one per week during the first 7 to 8 weeks of school, and this takes place during a before school module that usually lasts about 45 minutes. I'm going to highlight the data, diving into a bit more detail with a couple of them. As a new implementation, we did not introduce them all at once. It would have been overwhelming and ineffective, as we wanted the teachers to have their own data to use and plan with. We are not all proficient at using each set of data, even a year into the implementation. We are getting there though, and have goals for the next school year. We'll start with the big picture, the long-term calendar. When I think about the long-term calendar, I think of one of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Begin with the end in mind. I talk about the long-term calendar a lot, and we will spend the most time on it today, as it sets the stage for so much of what goes on in a week, a month, a semester, and a school year. Remember, teaching a direct instruction program is about lesson coverage at mastery. It is not about lesson coverage or lesson exposure. It is to the detriment of the student if we do not bring every lesson to mastery, and it is a root cause as to why a student may not be showing progress in reading. RMSE Grade K and Grade 1 were purposefully designed to be taught in 160 lessons, taking about 45 to 50 minutes to complete one lesson at mastery for the average student. There are about 174 instructional days in the state of Colorado. This means that if the average kindergartner does one lesson per day at mastery, he or she will finish RMSE Grade K at the end of kindergarten. It is also understood, and we have the data to support, that when this happens, the student will be able to meet or exceed end-of-year kindergarten assessments when finished. The same can be said for RMSE Grade 1. If we are able to teach all of RMSE Grade 1 by the end of the school year, the students will benchmark on end-of-year first grade assessments. In our district, we allocate 130 minutes of instruction to reading every day, hoping that most groups will get through 2 lessons per day at mastery. In the end, we have the majority of our kindergarten groups well into RMSE Grade 1 by the end of kindergarten, and most first grade students in RMSE Grade 2 material by the end of first grade. Acceleration of learning is critical to our system. We use a long-term calendar to plan this out. A long-term calendar is simply a blank calendar. We know that time is a variable that we as teachers and administrators have control over. Again, our district allocates 130 minutes to reading instruction every day in kindergarten and first grade. If we can plan out how our instructional time will be used, we quickly start to see how far we can take the students in their learning to read in a semester or a school year. The long-term calendar is a best guess. It is not a gotcha model in which an administrator might come in on October 10th and say, why aren't you on lesson 143? The long-term calendar is a planning document that helps us predict and monitor growth. As we are staying on track, and are we staying on track? And if not, what's getting in the way? We need to allow for some wiggle room in our instruction, that some lessons will be more difficult than others, requiring the teachers to go back and reteach the lesson. We usually have teachers create a long-term calendar after they have been with their groups for about 2 weeks. This gives them time to determine the group's rate of learning and to see how long it takes them to achieve mastery of a lesson. We factor testing time into the instructional time. We refer back to the long-term calendar throughout the semester to see whether we are closing the gap, keeping the students at grade level, or accelerating their learning to be above grade level. We will also adjust the long-term calendar if there are significant changes to the group or the rate of learning. Though some teachers create a long-term calendar for the entire year, it is most effective to create one for the semester or until mid-year testing. The reason this is important is that groups change. You might start to fast cycle, or you may have to go back 10 lessons. Sometimes looking at the whole year is overwhelming because so much can and does change. Looking at this example, this is a first grade group that was on RMSE Grade K Lesson 104 on September 5th. They are considered to be below grade level. During the first 2 weeks of school, this teacher determined that the group was able to average about 8 lessons per week, including reteaching and testing. So she added 8 lessons per week through the end of grade K and then moved into grade 1 lessons. According to her long-term calendar, this group should be around lesson 54 by Christmas break. Not quite to the mid-program lesson 80, but definitely closing the gap because she's averaging more than 1 lesson per day. Here's the same group with an adjusted long-term calendar. By the end of September, the group was demonstrating such a high level of mastery and acceleration that the teacher decided to place test them for RMSE Grade 1. Each child passed, so she began RMSE Grade 1 Lesson 1 on September 29th. She still thought she could average about 8 lessons per week. Notice what that did to her lesson coverage at mastery. Now, instead of hoping to get to lesson 54 by Christmas, they will be closer to lesson 80. Lesson 80 is key at both grades K and grade 1 as it signifies mid-program or mid-year of a grade level. If we can get the groups to lesson 80 by the mid-year testing, they should and will benchmark if they have been taught to mastery. We have also found that when looking at planning in this way, teachers are much more protective of their RMSE time. They do not like reading to be canceled, as that can make a difference of 2 lessons being lost or more depending on the number of days. Again, the long-term calendar is a best guess. It is beginning with the end in mind. It should not be treated as a be-all, end-all. Instead, it is part of the conversation and problem-solving process. The next piece of data we will look at is how we align the progress monitoring of an outside program measure by using our long-term calendar. Before I show you how we align the trajectory line for progress monitoring with RMSE, let's look at how most schools and grade levels set their trajectory lines. Here's a first grade example for nonsense word fluency, or NWF, correct letter sounds. Typically, all students in first grade get the same trajectory line. We plot the beginning of the year expectation for NWF 27 at the beginning of September. We write in the months of the school year and make the bullseye for the end of the year goal, 58, at the end of the school year. Having the same trajectory line works if all students are on the same lesson on the same day throughout this school year. Direct instruction and reading mastery place students in groups at different instructional levels or lessons. Therefore, we need to adjust the trajectory line to align with where our long-term calendar says we are anticipating being at the middle of the program, lesson 80, or at the end of the program, lesson 160. Note that I did not say where we will be at the middle of the school year or at the end of the school year. Instead, we look at where they will be within the program. To determine how to draw the trajectory line according to their RMSE placement, we have to look at our long-term calendar. Going back to our original calendar, we note that this group of first graders are still in grade K material. If they are appropriately placed and being taught to mastery, their growth can be seen between mid-kindergarten and end of kindergarten reading measures. We wouldn't progress monitor them on first grade measures because they are not there in the program yet. We see that they are scheduled to finish RMSE Grade K by the end of October. We use this information for progress monitoring and drawing the trajectory line. We look at the mid and end of year goals for kindergarten in NWF because that is where we will see growth. 17 correct letter sounds for mid-year, 28 correct letter sounds for end of year in kindergarten. On the student's progress monitoring graph, we put 17 at the beginning of the year and 28 mid-November, giving us a bit of a buffer between the end of October goal and when they might actually hit the end of year number according to Dibbles. Again, this is an example of a student or a group that is below grade level in first grade. When we tested this group for RMSE grade 1 at the end of September, our goals for progress monitoring will change as well. Now, we expect the students to meet mid-year first grade goals by the middle of December because they will reach lesson 80. The trajectory line on the progress monitoring graph must reflect this. Now the student is chasing the blue line, the first grade progress monitoring line, 27, beginning of first grade, to 43, middle of first grade. It is a steep line, but if they are appropriately placed and the teacher is teaching to mastery, the student should be able to stay on or above that trajectory line. Here's an example of a group that is above grade level. This group is made up of first graders, but they are scheduled to end RMSE grade 1 by the end of November. So we move the bullseye over to mid-December. We do not give them until the end of first grade to hit the end of year first grade benchmark. If they are appropriately placed and we're teaching to mastery, they will hit the end of the year benchmark by lesson 160 of grade 1, even if that happens at the end of November for these first graders. When they move into RMSE grade 2 as first graders, their progress monitoring must move up to second grade criteria. The third piece of data that we use is the pacing guide. The pacing guide is different than the long-term calendar in one major way. The long-term calendar is our best guess. Our pacing guide is our actual teaching. Each teacher fills out the pacing guide as they go. Each day, they record what lesson they taught. This pacing guide allows teachers to record the lesson coverage of multiple groups. At the end of the month, teachers find their average lesson gains. We can see that in this example, the RMSE grade 1 group averaged 1.45 lessons per day. The RMSE grade 2 group averaged 1 lesson per day. These rates are important to consider when looking at groups that we are hoping to accelerate the learning of. If we are not averaging more than 1 lesson per day, acceleration will not happen. We will only make 1 year's growth. Teachers will often compare their pacing guide with their long-term calendar to see how close or how far off they are. If they are far off, we try to determine why. Are the students appropriately placed? Are we using all allocated time? Do we have enough allocated time? Is the teacher teaching every student in lesson to mastery? The pacing guide tells us quantity of instruction, not necessarily the quality of it. Lindsay, do we have any questions so far about these pieces of data?
Yeah, if you have a question, feel free to type it in the question bar. We'll monitor that through the presentation and answer them all at the end. So no questions as of yet.
Perfect, I'll keep going. All right. I introduced you to the group update sheet in the last webinar. Each building is required to submit weekly updates of their lesson coverage at mastery on one spreadsheet. This snapshot gives teachers, coaches, and administrators a quick glance as to where their current groups are in the different levels. Teachers can reference this document when deciding whether to change the placement of a student. The spreadsheet you are looking at captures RMSE group information as of December 19th, around the 82nd day of school. The groups on the top half are those that have been established in kindergarten. The bottom half are the established groups in first grade. The column to the far left, titled Current Lesson, tells where each group ended the program at the end of that week. The second column, titled Teacher, names the teacher of each instructional group, and the third column indicates how many students are in each group. The fourth column tells us where each group started on the first day of school. That number, or that column, doesn't change at all, but we'll reflect on it here in a little bit. Okay, so here is the same school, Excellence Elementary's group update sheet for May 6th. So this is just a couple weeks ago. It was around the 161st day of school. You can see that they are all gaining in their lesson coverage at mastery. Most kindergarten groups, up at the top, are well into RMSE grade 1 material. If you look at the bottom of the first grade groups, the RMSE grade 2 groups are taught as one big group. So the RMSE grade 2 group at lesson 7 has 26 students in it, and it's taught whole class, as is the RMSE grade 2 lesson 37. And just as a quick snapshot, we'll come back to it, you can see where they started and just how far they've taken those students. They have accelerated the learning and really done a great job with lesson coverage at mastery. Another piece of data we use extensively and consistently in our system is our mastery test grade sheets. We all use the same grade sheets when recording the results of in-program testing. The consistent use of forms allow us to help each other interpret our data and determine next steps more efficiently. If everyone used their own type of form, time would be wasted trying to understand how they recorded their results and then teaching them how maybe I recorded mine. Teaching the teachers how to fill out the in-program grade sheets is the first data collection piece we teach them. Honestly, we tell them that we put all our eggs in the mastery test basket. So it is absolutely critical that we all record the results accurately, regardless of what they might be. When the grade sheets, when the grades are entered, we highlight the cell. If the student passed with 85% or higher on a mastery test, and or they met both the air limit and the time limit on a fluency checkout, we highlight the cell green. If they scored less than 85% or did not pass one of the criteria for the fluency checkout, we highlight the cell red. Though some buildings have created an electronic grade book, the expectation is to always have the paper copies at hand. There is, I always tell the teachers, there's just something to be said, and we feel it. There's a physiological reaction when you have to pick up that pink highlighter and highlight a cell red. We don't like doing that. Color is very powerful. So at first glance, when you look at this spreadsheet, without knowing the details or even what the tests are about, you look at it, you see green, and you think green is good. What about this group? Without diving into the details, what do you notice? There is much more red. When we see red going horizontally, like for student number 1 and student number 2, we take note that there is something going on with that student's level of mastery. When the red is vertical, like in test 3 and test 6, we note that something is going on within that test. The important thing to look for when you see red on a grade sheet is that the students were retested to ensure that mastery was eventually achieved. So you can see their retest scores underneath the red. Here are a few more examples. Green is good. This group seemed to start off strong, but looking at lesson 25, the test itself seemed to be difficult because of all the red on the vertical. Lesson 30 was even more challenging, and things did not seem to get better by lesson 35. We decided to take this group back to lesson 25 and get another running start, because it was more than just 1 or 2 students. Though it doesn't always feel good to have to go back 15 lessons or 15 days of instruction, the running start can be a confidence booster for the students, and that confidence might be what they need to gain traction moving forward. And here was what happened with that group after their running start. Green is good. It was cleaned up. Another data collection point that we use with our lower groups, or groups that are hardest to teach, is the Fluency checkout books. The Fluency checkout books are copied passages of the time checkouts the students are tested on every 5 lessons from lesson 108 in grade K all the way through RMSE grade 1. These copies allow teachers to keep a running record of the errors the students make during the checkout. The teacher can then look at the data, look at the errors, try to analyze them, maybe find patterns, and create extra review or reteaching if needed. Students in the middle and high groups in the core classrooms typically do not use these books, as their errors tend to be 0 or 1, and that's a lot of paper usage when it's only 0 or 1 error. Finally, our teachers use daily data collection sheets to capture notes, errors, and individual turns throughout each lesson. We've created a number of data collection sheets depending on which program level the teachers are currently teaching. This is an example of a data collection sheet in which the teacher tracked individual turns in reading, signified by the check marks. If the teacher heard a mistake, she made a minus sign. This is a great first step in using data collection sheets, because there's a lot to manage within the lesson itself. As teachers get better at managing all the parts of the lesson, the data they record on their data collection sheets become more detailed. In addition to recording individual turns taken, this teacher actually records the type of mistakes the students are making. For example, Divine on the top row, it said she instead of her, and then she self-corrected it. Data collection sheets serve to help the teacher in planning instruction. What needs to be reviewed with individual students? What might need to be reviewed with the entire group? The only time a coach or an administrator would need to look at the data collection sheets would be if a teacher expresses concern regarding a particular student or group. We would want to be able to look at these sheets to see if we can see a pattern that maybe the teacher isn't seeing. If we don't have the data to look at, it's really hard to coach around what the next step should be. So the question becomes, what do we do with all this data? We, in our district, are fortunate enough to have common planning time amongst grade levels, and we have a number of, I think it's once a week, we schedule data team meetings. And the focus of the data team meeting changes, so they'll have a literacy focus one week, they'll have a math focus the following week, they'll have a writing focus, and then they actually might bring it back to some more reading. So we hold monthly data meetings as grade level teams to look at the data and the progress the students are making. Teachers are expected to bring their mastery test grade sheets, their progress monitoring graphs, and their long-term calendars with them. Most teachers keep their data in a big 2-inch DI binder, which usually includes the other data points in case they have specific problems, the pacing guide, the data collection sheets, and the Fluency checkout books. The questions outlined on the screen right now is what we call the order of operations that we use when problem solving around data, especially when we see a student struggling to be at mastery. Think about these questions as a decision tree. You start with number 1. Are my students at mastery within the program at their current lesson? This is determined by looking at the grade sheets. If students are not at mastery, meaning their scores are highlighted red, there is really no reason to talk about their progress monitoring or whether we should be accelerating their learning. The teachers need to bring those groups that aren't at mastery to the data team conversation to ask for help or to help brainstorm as a team how to help that student or students within this group start to achieve mastery. When the teacher can answer yes, my grade sheet is green, green is good, then they go on to number 2. Number 2, do my students' placement in RMSE align with the DIBELS progress monitoring trajectory line? Once we know that they are at mastery within the program, we want to see that the work is being validated by an outside measure. If the student is significantly below or significantly higher than the trajectory line you drew on their progress monitoring graph, you want to problem solve around that. If they're significantly below it, it makes you wonder, is there a placement issue that it's too hard? If they're significantly higher than the trajectory line, placement might be an issue as well. Is the work too easy in reading mastery for them? It's all data and information we bring to the table. We don't use just one piece of data as the be-all, end-all. Once the groups are at mastery and their outside measures are aligned with their placement, we go on to question 3. Are the students at grade level according to RMSE program expectations? For example, if it is the 119th day of first grade, the group should be on lesson 119 of grade 1. If not, we need to problem solve ways to accelerate learning and get through more lesson coverage at mastery in less time, because our ultimate goal is finishing grade K at the end of grade K, grade 1 at the end of grade 1. You would not go on to number 3 until numbers 1 and 2 are yeses. When numbers 1 through 3 are all yeses, we continue to find ways to enrich, accelerate, strengthen the mastery of all students. This order of operations helps teachers and administrators focus on where to problem solve first. They were able to understand and respond to their data in a more effective and efficient way. Any questions about the data?
Tina, we do have one question. How do you communicate with parents about progress?
That's a great question. I know that we have a standards-based report card, and so they'll obviously get communication during the parent-teacher conferences. Also, they'll get progress reported to them at the report card. When it comes to information that's shared to them throughout the school year, I don't know that we have a formal schedule that we send home progress monitoring points every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. When students move groups, whether they move up in a group or they move down in a group, we absolutely notify the parent. And usually if there's a movement down in a group, that parent has been notified a couple mastery tests before the movement happens, just so that they're aware of it. And if by chance they're able to do some extra work at home with their student or their child, then they can do that. So right now, it lives in just having the report cards. We know the data, we have the spreadsheets, and so if a parent were to come in, our teachers are able to articulate that, but we don't, as of right now, have a formal process.
Great. Okay. That's the only question I have right now.
All right. So we are going to look at some of our end of year data. I am really excited to share with you some of this data. I'm going to use Excellence Elementary School's data, as they were the school that we looked at their mid-year data in January. Most of the RMSES core schools followed in a similar fashion to Excellence Elementary's. And I will then show you the kind of a big summation of where we stand within the 8 schools that used RMSE as a core. Remember, there are 160 lessons in RMSE grade K and 160 lessons in grade 1. Knowing this, think of lesson 80 as being the mid-year goal for average kindergarten, and lesson 160 being the end-of-year goal. In first grade, RMSE grade 1, lesson 80 is the mid-year goal for average first graders. Lesson 160 is the end-of-year goal for them. All right. So let's take a look at Excellent Elementary's groups update sheet, and we'll be able to make some predictions. This group update sheet was for May 6th, the 161st day of school. This was right around the time of end of year testing. I've added a column to the right to note just how many lessons each group was able to get through in 161 days of school. Because we allocate so much time for reading, most groups were able to get through at least 160 lessons. I would like you to focus your attention to the first grade groups, as this was the gap we had to close this year. None of the first grade groups started first grade in RMSE grade 1 at Excellence Elementary. The highest group at the bottom there started RMSE grade K lesson 80. In 161 days of school, most groups were able to teach well over 200 lessons. That required planning and purposeful instruction. It required teaching RMSE with precision, integrity, and enthusiasm. This situation was not unique to Excellence Elementary. All of our first grade groups in the 8 schools tested mid-kinder, mid-grade K at the beginning of first grade. So go back to our ability to predict benchmark based on where the groups are in the program. Notice at the bottom there are 3 groups in first grade: the transition lesson 15, the grade 2 lesson 7, and the grade 2 lesson 37 that are all above RMSE grade 1. What would you predict for these students regarding being benchmark, strategic, or intensive? Green, yellow, or red? Look at the groups in the middle of first grade. Grade 1, lesson 92, and lesson 120. What would you predict with regards to their benchmark? And then look at the 2 lowest groups. Grade 1, lesson 24, grade 1, lesson 57. What is your prediction? Here's how each individual student in the groups tested. Green means that their composite was benchmark. Yellow means they were strategic, and red means they were still intensive, according to first grade end of year testing. As predicted, the top 3 groups, the 3 columns to the far right on your screen, were benchmark, minus a few. The lowest groups to the left were all red, and the middle groups had a mixture of the colors. The groups that were in the middle of RMSE grade 1, so if you look, Bennett, RMSE grade 1, lesson 92, that group and the lesson 57 group actually had their data aligned with the middle of the year expectations for first grade regarding their oral reading fluency and their nonsense word fluency. So when you looked at Bennett's groups and their DORF, they were actually hitting around 23 to 25 words per minute, which would make sense because they were halfway through RMSE grade 1. And this represents what first grade looks like across our district. The teachers noted that even the quote-unquote low students were reading higher than some of the average students in first grade from years past. One thing that the teachers also noted was just how high their high readers were. Their words per minute were higher than they had ever seen before in first grade. So these were the 2 high groups at the end of first grade at Excellence Elementary. So you can see their DORF fluency had a goal of 47. It's the 3rd column of numbers to the left. Their goal was 47, and you can see just how much higher than 47 being the end of year first grade goal the students were reading. Even more, look at their accuracy, which is the next column over. The students were reading in the high 90%. This is evidence of students that have been taught to mastery in their ability to decode with great automaticity. This is first grade's data from beginning, middle, and end of year in first grade at Excellence Elementary. The top 3 bars show you the composite scores. So they were 45% benchmark in the fall, 29% benchmark in the middle of the year, and 61% benchmark at the end of the year. For a grade level that did not have a single group start RMSE grade 1 in first grade, this team did a tremendous job of closing the gap. The teachers on this team and all the first grade teachers on the RMSES core teams are so excited for next year when the kindergartners who are well into RMSE grade 1 material already roll up to first grade. They don't anticipate a drop at the beginning of the school year or the middle of the school year because the students are so much higher coming in to first grade. This is kindergarten data from the beginning, middle, and end of the year in kindergarten at Excellence Elementary. The top 3 bars again show you the composite scores. They were 28% benchmark in the fall, 46% in the middle of the year, and 78% benchmark at the end of the year. Significant gains were made throughout the school year. Though kindergarten isn't as high at the end of the year as they have been in years past, we know why. RMSE does not teach letter names, and the letter naming fluency measure affected the overall percentage quite significantly. In addition, most high end of year kindergarten percentages drop at the beginning of first grade in our district, which means the skills that they had learned at the end of kinder didn't stick and transfer over to first grade historically. Again, we don't anticipate that happening at the RMSES core schools. All right, here are the 8 RMSES core schools. Their middle of the year data and the end of year data for both kindergarten and first grade. All grades and schools saw increases in benchmark scores from the middle of the year to the end of the year. Knowing that letter naming fluency affected the overall composite in kindergarten, we added the percentages of students' benchmark on phoneme segmentation and nonsense word fluency. I'll give you a moment just to take a look at the data. Excellence Elementary obviously has the arrow. We are pleased with the results, and much of these results we already had predicted based on our long-term calendar and knowing how far into the programs we would be getting in kinder and in first grade according to our long-term calendars. We also know that we still have a lot of work ahead of us, and we have very clear goals for each team and a lot of work in professional development over the summer to be attentive to. What I believe we did this year was set a solid foundation of understanding mastery-based instruction and using data to drive our instruction. Our teachers know what mastery looks like, sounds like, and feels like for the teacher. They also know what mastery looks like, sounds like, and feels like for the students. They know it is about lesson coverage at mastery, ensuring proper placement of every student, and using all allocated time. Do we wish our numbers were higher? Of course. But it goes back to the slide I shared with the teachers and administrators at the beginning of the implementation. It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it. The hard is what makes it great. This is hard work, but it has been work worth doing. The teachers and administrators feel really good about their students' ability to read. They all acknowledge and are excited about how excited their students are in being readers. They know they have students reading at levels they have never experienced before, with great accuracy, great understanding, and great confidence. As we move forward this summer and look at the fall, we definitely have an agenda. We have a strong professional development program in our school district. We will be offering 16 different direct instruction classes, from beginner to advanced to the data to engagement. We just want to be able to continue to grow those teachers in their skill set so that they can have that effect moving forward in the fall in implementing year 2. I noted earlier that we do have 5 more schools that will start RMSE as core in the fall. So we will have a full, pretty much replicate what we did this year with the second wave. And what's interesting is as we go out and we place test the students in these 5 schools, they are falling in just where the kids from last year fell in, middle of grade K. And teachers are asking the same questions, and so it's reassuring to me that we can do this even with 5 more schools getting added on next year. We will continue professional development for our year 2 implementers. It's not a one and done type of implementation. We need those teachers to continue to fine tune their practices, their ability to use the data to drive their instruction and to try to accelerate the learning of all the students. Coaching support will continue. And then one thing that we're working on is that transition into second grade, to going from RMSE grade K, grade 1, and even into grade 2 material, and what that will look like as they go into a different literacy program in second grade. Some of our groups, we've made the decision as a district that if we have kids in first grade that did not finish RMSE grade 1 and RMSE transition, they will actually continue in second grade until they're finished with those 2 levels, and then we'll transition them into the literacy program they use in second grade. So, are there any questions that I can answer, Lindsay?
We just have one question.
Yes.
Since you're able to predict this student data and you have these 5 new schools coming on,
Yes.
what would those teachers tell the new teachers, essentially, about the program?
Right. Oh, that's great. Well, I'm happy that that question came because I want to close with the link that's at the bottom of my screen. So we professionally developed our teachers and had a lot of early release professional development through the school year. And our last one in March and April with our core teachers, we asked them at the end of our time together to take some notes on an index card. And on the front of the index card, we asked them to write down one thing that they were pleasantly surprised with that happened this year with regards to their implementation or their students or anything that they were just pleasantly surprised with. Underneath that, we asked them to note what they thought might have been the root cause of that pleasant surprise. What might have caused that to happen? And then on the back of the index card, we asked them to give a piece of advice to the schools that are coming on board or to the teachers who might be moving towards using RMSE as the core. And so we collected all of their index cards, and I'm going to click on this and I'm going to show you we had 85 responses. So this first column is what was your pleasant surprise. So person number 1 goes across. So person number 1 says the pleasant surprise was it works. The root cause of this surprise, that teacher said it was because I trusted the program. And the advice for a new DI or RMSE teacher that person number 1 gave was trust the program. So I'm going to let you read through a couple of them. You're going to hear similar sentiment throughout regarding what their pleasant surprise was and what their advice to the new teachers would be. So I'm going to scroll down and give you a moment to read a couple of them. It is absolutely humbling to have conversations with the teachers in our district, especially the veteran ones who say, I've taught so many programs, and I have never seen kids read with such confidence and such high levels as I have with this program. So that's the sentiment they share with their pleasant surprise, is just how significant gains those students were able to make in their reading. Their advice all fell along the lines of just do it. Just take the leap of faith, just try it, be open. As we're having end of year data conversations with every team this week and next week, we chuckle with our teachers that are implementing it this year. I look at them and I say, just remember, we'll never have another first year. And we chuckle because it was blood, sweat, and tears. There was definitely times during the school year where we were overwhelmed and we wanted it so badly for our students, but we trusted the system, we stuck to it, and at the end of the school year, when we whip around and we say, you know, what are your thoughts, closing thoughts, they're like, let's do it, next year, bring it.
That's great, Tina. Thank you for sharing all of that feedback.
Yeah.
And so thank you for attending the webinar today. We'll be sending a follow-up email with a link to this recording, as well as the previous 2 sessions that Tina conducted, how her planning went in the beginning of the year, what was the mid-year checkup, and of course this presentation, as I've mentioned. Also, as you exit the webinar today, a survey will open, and we appreciate your feedback to help us improve and plan future webinars. If you have additional questions, feel free to contact us at webinars@mheducation.com. And again, I'm Lindsay Root, and I'd like to thank Dr. Tina Eartham for all the support this year with these series. Have a great closeout to the school year, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon over the summer. Bye-bye.